If you were in a dense forest, in a dark forest in which you are in constant danger, where you feel the mystical power of everything that is around you, and you manage to escape this forest, would you return to it? Well, if you have the opportunity to play the expansion of a game which has all that, I'm sure you would like to. Hello, this is Michel via ten Sorbet, and this is a new episode of Wojennik TV. As you all know, I am a huge fan of the HEXplored system. I like the games which were published in this system. I think they are extremely interesting, extremely entertaining. And I have already presented a few movies concerning this system. I have presented both the review of the first game published in this system, so of The Valley of the Dead King, as well as the second, The Forests of Adrimon. But I still haven't presented the review of the expansion for the Forests of Adrimon. So now it is time to do it. This will be the review of the expansion called Return to the Forests of Adrimon, published alongside the base game in 2019 and thanks to a successful Kickstarter campaign. The game was published by Mariucci J Designs and it was created by Jonathan Mariucci himself and by Katki Mondry and Nathan Laws. This game, this expansion, was published in the same way that the expansion for the first installment, so for The Valley of the Dead King, was released, because the core game was published in a separate box than its expansion. We got one big box containing all the elements which are necessary to play, and the additional element, the additional stuff, is closed in a second box. And today I'd like to present you the content of this additional box. Now I have already opened the box and showed you how those elements look during a previous unboxing, but today I'd like to once more browse through those elements and tell you how to use them and how they can expand your playing experience. So without further delay, let's take a look inside the box of the Return to the Forests of Adrimon. Here is the Return to the Forests of Adrimon. Now I have already showed some of the elements which are part of this expansion during my unboxing, but I'd like to show you them once more, telling you a few words about what exactly are they meant for. So firstly, it is important to say that most of the elements that we find in the box of the Return to the Forests of Adrimon can be used only when playing the Forests of Adrimon itself. But we do receive some elements which can be used in any other HEXplored installment, for instance in the Valley of the Dead King. And among those elements we receive three very interesting new roles. Those are the Rune Master, the Realm Crosser and the Wellspring Channeler. Each of them, as always, with a fantastic artwork on its cover, on its backside, which additionally enhances the playing experience and which adds a lot of depth and flavor. Now each of those roles is specific in the way that it has two specialties. Normally each role has only one specialty, but here, as you can see, we have two colored strips which indicate that those roles are double specialists, and all those roles are pretty strong. It is even recommended to use those roles when we are searching for some stronger characters, and it is recommended to use only those upgraded, those strong roles when playing the game. Because if we do attribute one of those roles to one of the players and a standard role to another player, this other player might feel a little weaker from its fellow gamers. Now, among those elements which can be used also in other games are new race cards. So not only rolls, but also races. And as you can see, quite a lot of them. And among those races, which include, for instance, the Ivy Knight, the Moon Elf, the Forest Guardian, the Shroomer, the Trent, the Spider Queen, we have also one extremely rare race, and this is the Feathered Dragon. Now, this is a real monster. Take a look at this bonus. +8 energy, +3 health. Only 1 when it comes to its food rating, and at the same time, an extremely strong capacity which increases the speed of our group by 1. This is a real monster. I have played the Feathered Dragon alongside one of the roles which come from this expansion, and it was a blast. I was a deadly machine. This is so strong, so powerful. You can just compare the number of additional upgrades that you receive to other races. This is pretty hilarious. Apart those elements, we receive one new mechanic which was already present in the Return to the Valley of the Dead King, and those are the additional trait cards, which work pretty the same way as races and roles. So it is another factor which will help to shape your own character. So among those traits we have guides, we can be vigorous, gentle, skilled, resilient, etc. We have several of them, and they work the same way as they did in the Return to the Valley of the Dead King. So firstly, we have starting parameters change, because when we get this trait we can instantly increase one of our stats but at the same time decrease another. Secondly, we will be able to upgrade those stats receiving additional levels of the trait. When we manage to acquire the first level of our trait, we unlock the special capacity, which is written on the bottom side, on the bottom part of the card. In order to obtain new levels, we have to acquire trait points, which will be scored on this trait marker. And those trait points will be acquired when accomplishing the conditions which are written in the middle of the trait. So in the rulebook we have an information that it is possible to both randomly distribute those traits to all the characters or even choose them. And after a few plays, I'd say that it is best to choose them than randomly draw them, because some of those traits work a lot better with your race, with your role than others. And if you get a random trait, you might feel that it is not to your advantage to make actions which will enable you to increase your traits, because sometimes those will require taking actions which do not work well with your race or with your role. If you're, for instance, a combat specialist who is specialized in delivering mighty attacks which wound opponents by taking their health, if you have a trait which concentrates on energy damage, this will be a contradiction, and it is, in my opinion, better to choose such a trait before starting the game. It is much more fun, it is also much more logical, and it gives you a better feeling. Having said that, it's an interesting addition, because not only you will be upgrading your trait, you will also receive bonuses concerning stats, which are, as you can see, on this trait circle. This is another way to increase this character building element of HEXplored. In the expansion we find new cards, and firstly those are new circumstance cards, and among those cards we find not only very strong opponents, level 5 as you can see, a wood giant, a black unicorn, or a spirit of the forest. We also find some new events. Some of them, as you can see, are unavoidable, but also some fantastic treasures such as the herbalist's kit
or the Satowen's gemstone. We find, for instance, also the Rod of Detection. So we have quite a lot of interesting cards, and it is a nice addition to the Circumstance deck. The second new type of cards are the new power-up cards, and those are pretty powerful ones because, in contrary to what we receive in the base game, we have cards enabling you to receive bonuses in more than one stat. So for instance, you can increase both your attack and your defense by +2. We can increase our both masteries by 1. We can increase 4 different stats by 1. We can increase all our skills. So those are extremely powerful cards, also associated to the traits. And finally, the dessert is this card. This is absolutely hilarious. This is the most powerful power-up card in the entire game, which instantly makes you increase all of your stats. Now, as you can see, the majority of those cards has also the Adrimon symbol, which makes you increase the Adrimon's power. Rather, it makes you increase the danger of Adrimon coming into the game, but it is the price that you have to pay for sometimes very strong bonuses which those cards grant. We receive also other special kinds of cards. This expansion introduces 4 new relics. Those are the Glaive of the Knight, the Crown of the Noble, the Cane of the Traveler, and finally the Amulet of the Scholar. The amulet is a pretty interesting relic because it is the only one which requires us to assemble or to gather only one fragment. Those are pretty powerful relics. All of them work in a different way than those found in the base game, though they also enable us to interact with Adrimon. In order to gather those relics, we of course have to collect the fragments, but as I said earlier, the amulet is only in one piece, so you can instantly grab the amulet. The glaive comes in 2 parts, so does the cane and the crown. So those are also nice additions. Finally, we receive new legendary equipment cards and a fantastic ally, the Petimony. Now, all those objects, all those treasures are very powerful. They can be found, for instance, by killing some bosses. For instance, the Great Dragon Skull can be acquired when killing the boss of the first level from the base game, etc. All of them come also with a fantastic artwork on the back side of the card, which is pretty fantastic because those artwork which are on those cards is just of the highest possible quality. So a lot of interesting stuff, a lot of interesting objects. Of course, this expansion is focused, as you might expect, on Adrimon and on the possibility of playing Adrimon herself. So we receive new placards. The role placards were already presented, but we receive also 2 new placards with additional enemies, and those are the Noble 3rd level boss and the High God Captain, the 6th level boss, the High God Captain, which will hunt the heroes in cities. And we have also the very powerful Hyperion, which is the biggest and most dangerous Adrimon's construct. And finally, we receive Elowen, the Dryad. It might seem bizarre that Elowen is here as an enemy because she is our biggest ally while playing the Forests of Adrimon. The Elowen's Grove is the place where you will be acquiring some pretty strong and very interesting mystical objects, but Elowen also succumbs to the power of Adrimon and she might be our foe. If she becomes our enemy, well, we do not have no, we do not have any other choice than try to defeat her. But as you can see, this is not easy at all. She's the 9th level boss with a great health, also with a shield. So she is very, very tough to beat. She has 85 health points, 130 energy. She is a real monster to defeat. I said a few moments ago that this expansion is focused especially on Adrimon, and we receive Adrimon's placard as it was the case in the Valley of the Dead King. In the Return to the Valley of the Dead King, we can play the evil enemy. So we can become the magic herself and play Adrimon. We receive our own placard with an explanation of how our turn works, what is the reward table, so what additional stuff we can receive when accomplishing some objectives. On the second side, we have all the information needed to play Adrimon, which concern her 3 stats: might, supremacy, and prowess. A place where we can store our 3 rituals and also our vitals, both our soul shield and our energy. So we can use those 2 capacities and also the might for the final battle in order to hinder the heroes and to make their life difficult. We receive a dedicated set of cards, a special deck of cards indeed, which is used only by the Magi player, and among those cards we will find rituals which work the same way as they did in the Valley of the Dead King, which allow us not only to influence our opponents but also to wound them, to attack them directly. We receive also some cards which work pretty much like destinations. We will try to accomplish some objectives in order to obtain new rewards. And in order to locate those places, in order to accomplish those missions, we will be using our sentinels, which Adrimon can control and which she can send in order to reach the place where such an objective is to be accomplished. Even more, those sentinels can move through the known world and uncover new tiles in the search of the tiles which have those objectives. This is a deck which can be used in 2 ways. First, we can use those cards in order to play them, in order to accomplish missions, in order to prepare or to play rituals, but we can also use this deck of cards as a fuel. We can discard them in order to increase our stats. So this is a pretty different approach from this that we have when playing as the players, as the heroes, because when playing as the players we do not have a deck of cards, we do not have a hand. We have some equipment cards sometimes, but we do not have this hand management aspect. When playing the evil Magi, we have this hand management aspect, and we have to decide how to use our cards, which as I said earlier, can be treated as a sort of fuel, as a sort of resource. We receive also additional tokens, which are used, for instance, only when playing Adrimon herself in order to mark some circumstance cards, and a set of dedicated dice. Now, the way that this expansion works is pretty similar to how the Return to the Valley of the Dead King worked. In the rulebook, we have also some additional rules, which are not related to physical components, but which add additional rules to the game. For instance, we have some new blessings which can be acquired when visiting specific locations on the basic tiles. We have also a list of new grove items which are possible to be acquired in Elowen's Grove. For instance, we have the extremely powerful John Hans Knuckles, which not only defends from damage, but it also reflects this damage to the attacker. So it's extremely powerful, but as you can see, it is quite expensive. So we have some additional rules governing, for instance, also moving in Elowen's Grove, because we can move through the wild. still exploring the base board, but not being physically on the base board, but still in this mystical elements world. But apart from that, most of the rules concentrates on playing the evil magi. So when comparing this expansion and the additional rules which this expansion adds to the Return to the Valley of the Dead King, I'd say we have a little bit less additional rules than we did in the Return to the Valley of the Dead King. Still, we have some interesting additional options. Now, I'd like to pass to the conclusion, and I'd like to share with you my final thoughts about this expansion. I'd like to tell you what I think this expansion adds to the Forests of Adrimon, and is it a thing which you should consider when playing the Forests of Adrimon? Is it something which increases a lot, enhances your playing experience? So let's check it right now.
The Hexplored saga is one of my favorite hero building systems. This is a so complex game. This is a game which with such a great climate, such entertaining, that I really enjoy each play of this title. I like the Valley of the Dead King. I believe I like the Forests of Adrimon even more. But in my opinion, the thing which is really the landmark of this whole installment is this hero building core of the game. The game is all about increasing your stats and making your hero more powerful. Now, there are many games which focus on hero building, but which are very easy to grasp. Those are games in which your additional capabilities, your special powers will be very limited. You have, for instance, games in which you will be different from your fellow gamer just because you have an additional +1 bonus in close combat. Or maybe you can then acquire an additional +1 modifier when using firearms. So those are pretty easy, pretty straightforward additions, and things which do not make your capacities and you as a hero, as an individual, very different from your fellow gamers. But in Hexplored, it's totally different. It's a totally different approach. Firstly, you have the big role placard on which you have different stats and on which you have very complicated, very complex special capacities. 2 of them. Those are called the masteries, and during the game you will try to increase the level of those 2 masteries, because each time you increase their level, something interesting happens. Some capacities will be unlocked only when you reach a certain rank. Some others will grant you bigger benefits when reaching a higher rank. And those capacities are really complicated. Those are complex capacities, making you quite unique, making you powerful, and making you useful in different ways. Because we have different specialties in this game, and different characters will be specialized in different things. Some will be excellent in close combat. Some others will be great as healers or as support characters. And if that's not enough, you receive also the race cards, which will even more increase the diversity and which will add additional depth, which will add different modifiers to your initial stats, which will grant you 1 additional capacity. So having this combination will greatly increase the number of possible characters that you can have in this game. And this is, in my opinion, one of the biggest advantages, of the strongest points of the whole system. It is absolutely hero focused, and you feel the development of your character through the entire game. In the Forests of Adrimon, it's even more felt because it is somewhat a race against time. Adrimon will be gradually upgrading her powers. She will be gaining strength. And if you do not have a sufficient growth level your own, you might get brainwashed by Adrimon at some time. So you will have to constantly upgrade your skills in order to avoid it. Now, Return to the Forests of Adrimon, being an expansion for the base game, of course enhances soul mechanics, it adds a lot of additional components. And the first most obvious element are the new races, and those are extremely powerful races, which in my opinion work extremely well if you are soloing this game, because using those races will grant you very interesting capacities and quite strong capacities, with also great races added to the game alongside with the dragon, which is absolutely breath-stealing. It's so powerful that playing this character makes you a real steamroller. What I like in this expansion is, of course, its visual aspect, because this is such a high standard. Now, Mariucci J Designs publishes games with such a high standard that I didn't expect anything else. Return to the Forests of Adrimon is just as pretty and as entertaining as the Valley of the Dead King or the expansion for the Valley of the Dead King were. I still believe that the game has an extreme depth, it has a fantastic climate, and Return to the Forests of Adrimon adds even more flavor because it adds additional elements, growth elements, it adds a lot new blessings, it adds those new races, it adds also the possibility to play as Adrimon herself. And this is of course also the reason why you should grab this expansion, because we all like to play the positive characters. We all like to be the good ones. But to be frank, sometimes we just want to be evil. Sometimes we want to play as the bad one. And Adrimon is such a powerful foe that taking control of her and playing as Adrimon is just a pleasant thing to do. It changes also your playing experience, because it is a great option to playing cooperatively against the system. It makes you change. It makes the game different. Playing a game of player against players. You will still be cooperating in the group of players, but you will be having a living opponent, an opponent who will take a different approach than Adrimon, who is quite quiet in the base game if you play just cooperatively and not against a player. She will gradually increase her powers. She will send one of her automatons, a sentinel somewhere, but she won't be such a big hinder as the Dead King was in the first part. Still, she's extremely dangerous, and if you leave her too long alone, she will be unbeatable and very, very strong at the end of the game. So having this second mode when playing against a living player will change your playing experience, and that's a good thing. What I really like is also the addition of new bosses. You get several of them, and you get both Hyperion, which is extremely powerful, extremely interesting. He's the ultimate automaton created by Adrimon, but the most important is the addition of LON. Now, this is somewhat sad to see LON as a boss, as an opponent, because LON is our ally. It's she who grants us additional stuff in her grove. It's she who supports us in our journey. But even she succumbed to the will of Adrimon, and she can become our enemy. So this is an interesting addition, which also somewhat reverses the things that we perceived, the way that we perceived some things in the base game. So what I think are the weaker points of this expansion? The first one is the same thing that I said about the Return to the Valley of the Dead King. I believe that the traits, although interesting on paper, do not work very well. I think that their addition is just too much, because we had really a lot of options when it concerns hero building, hero construction. You get the different races, you get the different roles, and in my opinion it's totally enough. Even with those two elements you have tons of possibilities. Adding traits adds even more, but does it enhance your playing experience? I'd say to some point yes, but if you choose those traits randomly, you will have bizarre situations in which you will have a trait which do not works well with your race or with your role capacity, and you will be sometimes making bizarre choices during encounters, because sometimes you will be trying to do things only in order to increase your trade. Now, that's anticlimactic. That's not something which works well with all the great mechanics so well polished and working so well. So I think, although it is interesting on paper, trades do not add a lot of things and sometimes might be even anticlimactic. The second thing is that the powerful races and powerful rolls that you receive might feel not balanced, because when using them, if you use them alongside characters from the base game, the players taking control of the base characters will be feeling very weak, a lot weaker than the players using the roles from the expansion. So it is even recommended to use only characters from the expansion or only characters from the base game. And I believe that here we have the same problem that I underlined while reviewing the Forests of Adrimon and the Value of the Dead King. I have sometimes the feeling that when playing the game, the difficulty of the game doesn't increase with the increase of your own capacities. You become much stronger, your ranks will become higher, but the game isn't a lot harder. And it's up to you to increase its difficulty. So it's not the system who tells you, now you have to increase the difficulty by 1 level. It's up to you to make this decision. And when using those races and those rolls, you might feel that the game is even easier to play if played on the easy or on the lowest levels. So it might be perhaps a good idea to start the game with a higher difficulty level when using races and rolls from this expansion. So this is not a weak point, this is not a minus of this expansion, it's only a thing that you should take into consideration when using those elements, not to have later the feeling that the game is just too easy. Concluding, Return to the Forests of Adrimon is, in my opinion, an excellent addition to the base game. It has tons of interesting elements, maybe apart from the traits, but I'm not a fan of this system. Maybe some of you like them. I personally think they are not an interesting addition to the base game. Apart from that, I believe that all the components which are here are very interesting and they should be included in the base game. They enhance your playing experience, especially if you decide to play the one player versus other players mode, when one of the players will be taking control of Adrimon. If you grab the base game, you should definitely take also the expansion, because it just increases your playing experience. This was the review of the Return to the Forests of Adrimon, an expansion for the Forests of Adrimon, published by Mariucci J Designs. Thank you a lot for watching this movie. I invite you also to take a look at our other videos. Take also a look at our Facebook and Instagram accounts. And if you want to support Wojennik TV, you can become one of our patrons. Take a look at our Patronet account. Have a terrific day and see you next time.